success in all. You just have to, there just has to be a wide range in the city, right? So yes,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You can't just um we kind of get back to going backwards into redlining, right? If we choose
Mm,
to um put everyone in a specific area, right? And
agreed.
we don't want to go backwards. History will repeat itself. And so mixed income has seen a lot of success. A lot of properties that we have that are mixed income, people don't even know it's mixed income. They have not the slightest clue. They don't a lot of times, like, unless they go look and take a deep dive, they have no idea that we own it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
They have no idea. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because one, it's a good thing because of the stigma attached to it, right?
Right.
And we don't want anyone trying to figure out who their neighbor is, or all you need to know is that there's a respect level. When you meet your neighbor, you have, that kind of throws some of that out the window right there.
Yeah.
And you have no idea, if you walk through the door and you're saying, oh, that they're going to be just like this, or you know it just doesn't, it's not always the case. Majority of our program are elderly or disabled,
Mhm.
and most people don't even know that. So if when, kind of to your point earlier, when you're saying, oh, well, landlords may say, oh, people may trash the unit.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Today, we are so lucky to welcome Shay Mock. She works at the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority as an asset manager, but we know her because she used to work with Dan and Jared from Aspen Realty Co., previously as a landlord relations supervisor. But Shay has a huge background of working in the affordable housing space. So Dane, my guest co-host today, are so happy to welcome Shay. Welcome to the show, Shay.
Thank
Tell us a little bit
you.
about yourself.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
My
Thank you. Thank you for
girl.
having me.
yeah, just tell us a little about yourself and how'd you even get into the affordable housing realm, Shay? I think the listeners just want to get to know you a little bit better to get things started.
So, interestingly enough, I started in housing at the age of 14. In high school, you have to have internship credits, those wonderful things that they make you do in high school. And I decided to go to a local apartment complex that was in the area that I can walk to from high school. One of the largest apartment complexes in Columbus at the time. It no longer exists. But I started to do internship there for quite a few years to gain all of my internship credits, learn the business. And then once you get into housing, you just kind of never leave. Um, that's truly how it goes. If you talk to anybody that's like done housing, or even anybody that works at a housing authority across the country, most people don't just stumble across you don't go to school and go, I want to work in housing, or I want to do this. A lot of times it's somebody or you ended up, somebody else works in housing, and you learn it that way. I've always had a need to want to help people, so that also played a huge role in why I stuck with housing. Obviously, the things that you need to survive are food, water, and shelter, right? So those are the three major things, and that covers every demographic. I've seen every demographic come through the doorways. I've worked in Class A through C properties, affordable, LIHTC, workforce housing, subsidized housing, anything housing related, you name it, I've worked in it. I believe I was at a receivership. Yes, I was at a receivership before I went to CMHA. And if you don't know what a receivership is, it's where the big banks that own lots of properties or default, they have the control on the defaults of properties. We generally would take over those properties, render them back in good condition, and then either resell it or manage it ourselves. So got that kind of experience, and then transitioned to CMHA. Came into CMHA on a really, really entry level position as a housing advisor, working in recertifications, and then kind of worked my way through the company. So I've literally been in almost every department. We laugh about it all the time. at work. So just a vast of knowledge because I've almost touched every single department outside of maintenance. So whether that's applications, intake, contracting, landlord relations, rent increases, you name it, finance, now asset management, I've done it all.
Any truth to the rumor that they're going to be changing the name to Shay Mock Housing Authority?
I don't think that that's the case.
And for the listener who doesn't know, CMHA stands for Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, as Kent said, Shay and I go way back, probably 4 or 5 years ago when Jared and I first got started. I've told this story a couple of times, and this is me giving you your flowers, Shay. I still love I'll just hit you up on a text message every once in a while like this morning I sent her a text. I was like, Shay Mock is on the podcast with Velvet Dance, New Edition Dance. But we met when Jared and I were getting started, and being in medicine, Jared and I were used to Medicare and federal programs, and those were all a mess and just made our lives miserable. But I stopped in, I think I set up an appointment with you, Shay, and I stopped in at the CMHA headquarters, and when I left there an hour or whatever later, my mind was blown. It was so well run. You knew your stuff, and you took the time to educate an idiot like myself who didn't know anything about affordable housing, Section 8, but wanted to learn, and you made it easy. And I'll never forget, you told us when we bought our first 20 units, I came with kind of our vision board. This is what it looks like now, feces in the basement, mold in the walls. But this is what it's going to look like down the road. And Shay's been there, done that. She's like, okay, yeah, well, you got to show me. And and she came out and we showed it off, and she was like, all right, you're my guys. And so we ran together for the next couple of years. I miss the hell out of her now because she got promoted and moved into a new position. I don't get to mess with her as much. But for the listeners, Shay, why don't you kind of give the background on the Housing Authority and how it works with affordable housing? How does somebody qualify? What all do you guys do? Just as much information as you can get out there as possible, because I think even for people like myself and Jared who deal with it quite a bit, there's still some gray areas. We're not familiar with the inner workings. So, tell us about CMHA in particular, obviously, what you guys do, how you do it, and I'll finally shut up and let you talk.
No worries. So I think that's the common theme that runs throughout a lot of metropolitan areas that have a housing authority, is that people just really don't know where they fit in or how they qualify or what programming. The unique thing about CMHA is that we have our hands in so much. So we have so many sub programs. It's not just public housing or the housing choice voucher program. We also have project-based vouchers. We have emergency housing. We have so many different things. And so we deal a lot with special populations, which is what I absolutely love about us. So of course you can go through the wait list, right? And go through the general Section 8 or housing choice voucher program. We also have what's called project-based vouchers, which is a PBV. And for anyone who does not understand what that means, basically a housing choice voucher or Section 8 voucher can go with the resident anywhere that they go. The project-based voucher is attached to the unit itself. So if you move out of the unit, it frees up space for the next person. Kind of similar to public housing. Public housing, they can't take their vouchers, but we are moving out of the public housing realm and transitioning into what's called RAD PBV and standard PBV. There's just more money for us to be able to assist clients with whether it's renovations, there's just not a lot of funding sources from the government in the inside of public housing for what we want to provide for the city. So with project-based vouchers, we, like I said, we serve special populations. So we have senior housing, so people who can qualify strictly for senior housing. We have mixed income properties for families. We're working on something for veterans, I believe, right now. We have people who have aged out of foster care. So that's actually in my portfolio. It's called Scholar House 3. And if, when you turn 18, you don't have anywhere to go when you age out of foster care. So making specific housing for that if they are going to college, expecting mothers. We deal with the fact that there is a high infant mortality rate in the city. So we have programs that go with that. All of these different components for PBV vouchers have an abundance of social services that are attached to those things. So most of the time at every single property, there are social services and coordinators that are attached to every single property for those individual needs. So for example, if we have I'll just use Scholar House 3. If we have Scholar House 3, there's access to tutors, there's access to life coaches, there's access to so many different things that they would need to learn how to navigate. One, college; two, adulthood, finding jobs, all of those kinds of things. So it's just kind of a little bit a lay of the land for that. And then if anyone wanted to apply for any of those particular properties, then they would just apply directly at the site. There are a list of project-based units on our personal website, which means that those are buildings that we personally own. Housing Choice Voucher Program deals with the private landlords. So there is an affordable housing website that landlords post on, or whether it's on Apartment Finder or wherever else that they choose to post. And then the wonderful thing about it is Columbus has a new ordinance as of July, I believe, of 2021, that puts them as a protected class. So you cannot just deny a resident based on the fact that they receive subsidy from a third party or a third party source. It would have to be based on something else, but that can't be the qualifying factor.
Gotcha. And so, again, for the listener, just as a refresher, so CMHA does own its own housing. How many units in the Columbus metropolitan area? Do you know offhand how many you guys own now?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So in 2013, we have roughly about 1,700 units. As of now in 2023, we're looking at about 4,700 units.
Okay.
So
you were selling a bunch off a couple of years ago, and then you were building new, right?
And building, right. So with our acquisitions, we have an aggressive acquisition stance, and the ability for us to be able to create additional housing that is outside of just the housing choice voucher program gives us the ability to create mixed income housing, create workforce housing, create all of these different things to help feed into all of the programming that we need to have. If we just rely, like many government programs, if you just rely specifically on that funding, it could be this much at a certain point or here at another point, and we have to be able to service all of our clients.
Gotcha. And then how does somebody qualify and get into, if I'm new to town or I'm struggling, what are the criteria that I would need to meet? How do I get that voucher or program, and then I guess how am I streamlined into one program versus another?
So you're not necessarily streamlined. You get the opportunity to choose where you want to be. It's just going to be a matter of whether there's a wait list for that particular thing or not, right? So every household is different. So if you are, I'll just use a family of three. We would calculate a voucher based on how many people are in the household, the ages of, if you have two children, let's just say it's a mother and two children, if they're same sex, different sex, age gaps, and then that will determine the voucher, the payment standard or the voucher amount, the bedroom size for that particular person. We operate based on 30% of that person's income, because obviously 30% is a threshold of what we deem could be successful in paying all of your other bills, life things that come along. You're never supposed to pay more than 30% in rental cost. So we try to make sure that we're there. We do give them an extra leeway of 10% if they would like, if they have income coming into the household. Income is not a requirement, so we want to make sure that we're not steering anybody away, saying that you have to have income. We know that life happens, right? So making sure that anybody that we can assist, we assist them well. If you want to apply for the voucher, the regular voucher, they can just apply online and go into that pool. It's a lottery system, so it's not, I applied today and I have to wait on my number to be called. It's a lottery based system, just because there's so many people. We want the person that applied today to have the same opportunity as somebody who applied a year ago.
Wow, that's a really good fact, Shay. I didn't know that was based off a lottery system. Sometimes people just think it's a first come first serve situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned a couple of things. You talked about the project based voucher program, which are vouchers tied to a specific building, and you have the housing choice voucher program that's tied to a tenant.
Yes.
You mentioned that for project based vouchers, people can apply to those sites and get on the wait list. Just help the listeners understand, like, what is the magnitude of the issue right now? Like, for project-based vouchers, how long can people expect to wait? I know you can't quote me exact time, but maybe a range might help, versus how long do people might take to wait on the housing choice voucher program?
So I can't really give an estimate on the housing choice voucher program because it's a lottery system.
Fair.
So somebody can apply today and be chosen next week. Right.
Got it.
Or
Got it.
somebody can apply today and it'll be a couple of months to a year or so. Now with the project-based vouchers, it depends on the type of property, all of our and location. So all of our properties are spread out across the central Columbus area, including suburbs. It's not strictly for Columbus. It covers pretty much the entire county. So we've done a pretty good job with going to Hilliard and New Albany's and, spreading out to Grove City, et cetera, to give people more opportunity. If you're looking for senior housing, that's probably going to be the quickest turnaround.
And are we talking about years here, or are we talking about months? What do you think for the senior housing? And
we're not talking about months. I had somebody fill out an application 3 weeks ago, and they're moving in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, it really just depends on the client. To be completely honest, whether it's in a location that you want. We have multiple senior. I'll just use seniors for an example. We have multiple senior buildings throughout the city. If you apply for all of them, but you don't. One of them is the last on your list because you don't want to live on the north end of the city. Your family's closer to the east side of the city. Then it will all really just be dependent on the client on when that becomes available.
Got it. How about the lottery system? Do you know how many people are actually in the lottery system right now?
No, but I can find out for you.
Oh, just wondering. You think it's like thousands or hundreds?
It's definitely thousands.
Definitely thousands. Good to know. Yeah. Not the greatest situation, but maybe this is a good transition for us to understand, like, hey, there's significant demand for housing, but we want to understand from you, like, hey, in your prior role, working with landlords very, very closely, what type of problems did you run into in that position? Like, any sort of challenges you can kind of tell the listeners on what the housing authority faces when, dealing with landlords of varying sort of quality of housing.
Don't rip on Jared and I here. Don't rip
Oh,
on.
yeah. Let me go ahead and throw them under the bus really quick. I've got some stories. No, I'm just joking. Most of all, it's participation and knowledge, right? So either they don't know about the program and how it works, or the stigma that comes along with subsidized housing, right? Everyone likes to use these trigger words of low income housing, right? Not the same as affordable housing, not the same as workforce housing, not the same as vouchers, not the same. Like, so people lump everything together, right? And then a lot of times, like I said, it's active participation. It's the government, so there are things that we need, right? So whether I'm asking you to send me your W-9 so that I can, make sure taxes are in or taken care of, and yours, banking information so that we can do ACH to direct deposit. Sometimes, as a business owner, which I understand, you may or may not want to share that information. And that's kind of where we've seen the most pushback, is just the amount, the amount of people who did not want to offer up that information. At least that is what was relayed to us.
That is kind of wild. I would think that we're in 2023. Life is a little different around digital transactions, because I get it. When Amazon first came out, my parents wouldn't give me a credit card because they were afraid of identity theft. But now we're in 2023. I think it's direct deposit is very common nowadays. So that's a really, really interesting problem, Shay, where landlords aren't even giving you these very administrative items to make your lives easier. That's really interesting to know. I never knew that would be an issue. How about the quality of products or apartments that you have seen from landlords? Like, do you see that there are a lot of, you mentioned the stigma around low income housing, because I have faced that myself as a landlord, where people are like, oh, so they're more likely to trash the home, right? Because they all think like affordable housing is guns, drugs, and drama, when in reality, you and I both know it's just folks like my mom who just didn't speak English and just needed a launching pad. So what can you tell us about some of the units that you visited? Like, are they really, really nice? Are they really, really bad? Do you see a variety? What do you think there?
So the great thing about us is, and I think that Dane can kind of probably speak to it, is we have a stringent inspection process. So the initial inspection, it should not be anything that you would not live in yourself. Right. So I communicate that with a lot of landlords over the years. A lot of times I would go out and do a pre-inspection myself to, if it's a new landlord coming onto the program. If it's an existing landlord, then 9 times out of 10, there's a track record. We know that you're passing inspections, et cetera. But a lot of times you'll have people who inherit properties, or is new to housing altogether, and they don't want to make whatever the fixes are that are required by the housing quality standards. Those are things that are provided to us by HUD. So those things have to be those things have to be correct, and it can be something as small as chipping paint, right? So or trip hazards inside of a house, or there isn't a light switch cover on one wall, things like that. There's no caulking on the caulking is not newer, and there's gaps between the surfaces, those kind of things, right? So those are the kind of things that we're actively looking for on initial and recertification. Our properties have passed a lot of inspections, to the point where we were offered to do biannual recertifications. So I think that we've been in a good space in regards to that, but sometimes that can create a barrier with our landlords on, hey, I need you to make these changes, or I need you to, even if it's small things. sometimes if you have a list of small things to fix, it's just like, hey, I just don't want to participate, or I just don't want to do. So we see that a lot. We don't have a lot of, like, we don't have slumlords or, anything like that. It's gonna be active participants that are in their homes. We give the clients the right to reach out to us if there's an emergency issues, and then we address those things head on.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, we never had, even when we first started, we may have not passed one inspection here or there just as a learning curve, but it was never anything that we thought was ridiculous. But you hit the nail on the head. Like, that's what Jared and I always say when we're looking at buying a property, or we buy a property and then renovate it. I tell him all the time, I'm like, it has to be someplace that I would live in. And if it's not, then we need to either sell, not buy, or improve it. So I know I've always thought it was really fair. And as I'm really fond of CMHA. So what does CMHA need to continue to grow and expand and help more people? Is it more units? Is it more money from the government? Is it everything? I guess what do you guys need the most?
The most is going to be more units, and that's citywide. So whether somebody is participating in a subsidized program or not, the lack of affordable housing altogether, all the way around, is not in a space that we need it to be. Columbus is a growing city. We've had one of the hottest markets in the past 5 years running, right? So there's plenty of developers, plenty of jobs coming here, right? Taking up an abundance of space for housing. A lot of people moving from suburbs back into urban areas. So there's a lot of renovations and things going on. A lot of tax abatements that are being offered for properties, which is great. But I kind of want to touch on that at some point as well.
Yeah, you do. I was gonna hit you up right on that. So go ahead.
So we see the need for affordable housing, right? And I believe the city is doing their best to create a space where it is feasible for landlords to be able to afford whatever we are asking them to do as a city, not as CMHA, but as a city in general on the things that we need. The problem that I do see is that some developers may know the code a little too well. Just kind of like if you have a larger businesses and you know the tax code really well, right? And you know the loopholes and you know how to get around things. So if the city says, okay, hey, you're able to build this 252 unit property here, but 10% has to be between the ranges of, X and Z, right? There's no stipulations of bedroom sizes. And that's where I see the biggest problem. So a lot of times developers will create a lot of studios and put them in that price range, and they have met the quota, right? So then are we really affecting the affordable housing crisis? Are we making a change here? Not that studio apartments aren't needed, because I feel like single individuals get left in the dust a lot with federal programming, right? Because we're focused more on families.
Right. Yeah.
So studios are needed, but the average family is at least 2 to 3 people.
Right. Yeah. You've always told me 3 bedrooms. Well, you told me 1 bedrooms too for like your elderly housing, but 3 and maybe even 4 bedrooms are crucial. And you're working with me right now. I got a 4 bedroom coming on the market here in a couple of weeks, so I'm excited about that. Columbus is growing, and the real estate market, as you know, Girl, it is so different. I bet I've said this every day for the last 6 months. It is so different now than it was 4 years ago,
Yes.
5 years ago,
Yes.
in good ways and bad ways. But it sure as hell is not affordable anymore. Like, we haven't bought a property in a year because everything is overpriced. Columbus is growing. There's going to be like another million people, in the next 7 years or something like that, minimum. So, and there's a lot of development downtown, which is great. But correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm seeing is a lot of A-class, beautiful buildings going in because there is a lot of technology and higher paying jobs coming in. But what I'm also seeing is that the affordability component of affordable units, affordable housing is being pushed out. I don't know where it's going. So is that happening here in Columbus? And
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
It is. And kind of what I alluded to before, there are a lot of times there are affordable components tied into a lot of these properties.
Right.
But it really just depends on the property and what they agreed to
Yeah.
in order to develop wherever they're developing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't fit the need, and I'm trying to figure out where people are going to go. So that's my biggest, if we're just being honest here, I have no idea where people are going. If people were originally pushed out of renting in the suburbs, right? So that created hotbed of urban available only for affordable housing for quite a few years, right? And when everyone was on the suburban kick, I'm going to move out to the suburbs. That's the American dream. That's what we're doing. Cool. But then that wasn't available for everyone, right? As much as we like to think that things are equal and fair, which just wasn't, right? And then now, so you got people out in the suburbs, but then now there's a groundswell to get back to the urban core.
Right.
So then where do the people go?
No
one provides housing for not even just when I say affordable, I mean even workforce. I live in workforce housing myself. That means that if someone that makes, let's say, a decent salary of, anywhere from 40,000 to 120,000, you're in that middle range. You're not quite at the, at the top 1%, right? And you're not necessarily at the baseline of the poverty line, right? Where do those people fit? Which is where that affordable piece comes into it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's Section 8 or that it is PBV or that it is any of these other steps or low income tax credit. They might not fit within those ranges, but workforce housing kind of makes it to where it caps off at a certain point so that you're not charging $3,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment or, $3,000 for a studio like we're beginning to see around the city. So just making sure that people understand that affordability has so many different sub meanings to it. It can be market. Yeah. It just needs to be within the average median income.
Yeah.
The residents in which the city, has.
Right. Kent came into town a couple of weeks ago before he did his world tour, Shay, and we didn't get to drive around like all of downtown, obviously, but I showed him around. And Kent, you saw some of the beautiful
it's nice
infrastructure, but like I was driving around today at the 2 residential properties that I just purchased, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, there are cranes everywhere and everything. And I'm happy for, like you said, I'm happy for the city because everything is becoming really nice. But it's going to be Nashville before. I was in Nashville a couple months ago. Hadn't been in 6 years, and it is unaffordable, overbuilt, and everything's brand new. But I'm like, where do the people who make workforce income live. It's almost an epidemic right now in Columbus for sure.
So you can't buy a house right now. I mean, you could, but your interest rates are going to be absolutely absurd, right? And you can't rent an apartment for the size of the family that you need. What do you? We're stuck with what do we do?
Right. Yeah.
And I think, Shay, I think you're teeing this up perfectly for our next questions, which is like, hey, we just want to understand, why is affordable housing so hard to solve for? And you talked about the different levels of complexity, from the stigmas to various government programs. You talked about tax abatement, and I think you were trying to mention like, hey, certain developers get property tax exemptions if you put in a certain amount of affordable housing units, right? I just want to make sure the listeners follow that correctly. And I think hearing from your perspective, I think is going to be so important, Shay. It's like, hey, why do you think affordable housing is so hard to solve for? And if there's like one or two things that you think that we should work on in this generation, what do you think they should be? Because the whole point of this podcast is the question we ask everybody is, eventually when we compile all these thoughts together, we're getting another piece of the puzzle. And I don't think affordable housing is impossible to solve for, but it definitely takes a lot of people and a lot of knowledge and a lot of great ideas to kind of make it happen. So we'd love to kind of hear your perspective, Shay, coming from the public side.
It's very political, right? So that is, I would say, where I would like things to change, where I would like things to transition with this generation and moving forward, right? It's hard to make decisions for people that you've never been in a position of those people.
Right? Great point.
Or you're not actively involved enough to have the knowledge, right? So if you have people making decisions for those people, they don't know the different aspects of those things, so they can just not in bad faith, but just the sheer lack of knowledge, or you look over something that might be extremely important, right? So let's just take literacy, right? So there are a ton of people that have literacy issues, right? So when you're talking about leases, when you're talking about all of these different things, and then you say, hey, this person should know. And it's like, well, did you account for the population, right? If you moved yourself into an area and that specific area is making a turn, you're obviously gonna, you don't get to just create what you want there. The people are already there. You have to kind of figure out and navigate what's there and how do you help. We also need to not be self-serving. That's a big thing, right? So if I can say the top two things is not being self-serving. We have to look at the bigger picture. If you don't leave anything for the people that come after us, or you don't set the example now, it's going to get worse. It's just going to get worse over time, and no one's going to be able to help anyone. The lack of knowledge is also a huge thing as well. So being able to understand legislation, understand what's going through local, city, state, and federal, the things that are being passed. We get into voting booths a lot, and we just, we select yes or no on a levy that we have no idea what that means. Right? So being able to understand how you affect change, and that change is not kind of like how you said, it's not that it can't happen. It's that you have to want to know.
Correct.
How. You have to want to know how. So,
Shay, I mean, you said that so well too. I mean, we get into politics and we talk about sometimes folks are making decisions for people that they have no idea what they really want. They want to tell them what they want instead of listening to them about what they want. And I think that it was so beautifully said, Shay, because earlier I want to touch on the point you mentioned about mixed income housing. And I'm really curious to understand from your perspective, your experience, like, what have you seen work in this space? Because I've heard of folks where they said, hey, we can't just create a whole building of low income housing, because you might create a poverty pit for lack of better words, because then you don't have a system or services to support like some of the issues that you talked about literacy. How do you make sure that people have public transportation, access to food? It's not just you just plop a building anywhere and just like, hey, go figure it out. That stuff doesn't work. So I'm really curious to hear from your experience now that you guys own about 4,700 units. Like, where have you guys seen success? Like, is it mixed income housing? Is it definitely affordable housing with services? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on
I think that we've seen success in all. You just have to, there just has to be a wide range in the city, right? So yes, I agree. You can't just we kind of get back to going backwards into redlining, right? If we choose to put everyone in a specific area, right?
Agreed.
We don't want to go backwards. History will repeat itself. And so mixed income has seen a lot of success. A lot of properties that we have that are mixed income, people don't even know it's mixed income. They have not the slightest clue. They don't, a lot of times, like, unless they go look and take a deep dive, they have no idea that we own it.
Yeah, for sure.
They have no idea. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because one, it's a good thing because of the stigma attached to it, right? And we don't want anyone trying to figure out who their neighbor is, or, all you need to know is that there's a respect level. When you meet your neighbor, you have, that kind of throws some of that out the window right there.
Yeah.
And you have no idea, if you walk through the door and you're saying, oh, that they're going to be just like this, or, it just doesn't, it's not always the case. Majority of our program are elderly or disabled. And most people don't even know that. So if, when kind of to your point earlier, when you're saying, oh, well, landlords may say, oh, people may trash the unit or may do, a lot of the people that we serve are elderly or disabled. Right. So we have to kind of get away from that narrative. You're going to have a few bad apples. I'm not going to sit here and say that you do not, but that is with the market in general. You cannot guarantee that the person that you rent to that does not receive a housing subsidy is not going to trash your unit.
Right.
It is your job as a landlord. And what I drive home to landlords all the time is it's your credit screening. It's your background screening. It's all of those different things. It's the housing choice voucher. The landlord picks the tenant and the tenant picks the landlord.
Yeah. Yep.
So we kind of leave it in their hands so that it's not us forcing people on people, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that makes perfect sense because we had another guest on the podcast. He helps folks find Section 8 housing in the Detroit market, and he surveyed about 400 landlords and property management companies. And he said, hey, 24% of the market rate tenants actually cause damage above a certain threshold compared to 4% of Section 8 tenants.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's a stat you guys track at Columbus, because that would be an amazing stat to share, because we need to bust these myths that Section 8 tenants are going to come in and trash your home. That is not the case. You still have to do, like you said, Shay, screen your tenants, do the proper business fundamentals. Right. It's like every person that comes to the door does not mean they're a fit for your home. You have to screen them. You have to ask the right questions and make sure that they are qualified to live at your home. Just like any business out there, they qualify their lease before they try to make a sale. You are selling your home to a tenant in this situation, but you have to provide an outstanding product, which is your unit, to that resident so that they can and want to stay in your unit for as long as possible, because that lowers your expense at the same time. I think that's just a point that people forget about, because when they hear housing choice voucher is government subsidized, the government will pay the rent on time every single month, regardless of what happens, they just kind of take their eye off the ball. And that's definitely not the case. So I don't know, Shay, do you have any numbers? Like, if not, would love to kind of get a sense from you. Like, hey, do you guys track number of like damages caused by voucher tenants?
We keep a list if it's above a specific amount, because at that point, then what we did was added in our administrative plan that if it's above a specific threshold, or if there's something egregious, they need to report it directly to us, and then also go and get a judgment on the tenants so that we can hold those tenants responsible. A lot of times when tenants, whether it's CMHA or any other housing authority, what I've seen and heard across the country is people are not they're not following through, right? So then those same people stay on the program and go somewhere else because you as a landlord did not follow through with doing what was required in order for us to remove that individual from the program. So it just,
and that's the other great point.
goes.
You also hold your voucher holders accountable.
Mhm.
For some of your market rate tenants, guess what? When they
You're
trash
just out
your
of
home,
luck.
you're out of luck. You have to go to court to evict them, and you got to fight this long battle. At least here, you have an additional third party that is also equally vested in the interest of expanding supply for the housing and for the city. So
when I created the landlord relations position that I was previously in, I literally took 3 months to do nothing but interview landlords to find out where are the shortcomings, what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, what can we improve upon, what do you want to see, do you have any suggestions, how do I literally spent months gathering information so that we could put out new initiatives, right? And a lot of those new initiatives are in place. So whether it's timeframes of the back and forth of the emails for documentation, there were documents that condensed 5 different documents into one, those kind of things. Or if you were having an issue with a tenant, but you didn't want to evict them or you didn't want to put them out, but they probably just needed a conversation. Those things we're not responsible to do, but we do them anyway, because we want to make sure that one, we're setting up the residents for success, but we're also wanting to make sure that landlords are successful too. You have a business to run. And we understand that. Just like we run a business, we understand that they run a business as well.
Yeah, and I can vouch for everything. I've been quiet. This is the longest I've been quiet in a long time. Myself. No, everything that Shay has said for the last 5 minutes or so, I can vouch for. I don't have the statistics, but like damage or evictions, but I can tell you we have 168 units in the Columbus area. I don't know the percentage. Good number are Section 8 CMHA tenants, and I know we've evicted 0 of them. And day one, Shay came out to the property, and I showed her that I wasn't full of crap, and she was like, "Yeah, this is great." And she looked at me then and said, "If you have any problems with any of our clients, any of the Section 8 CMHA tenants, you come to me first, and I'm going to make sure that it never happens again." And you even gave me little tips, like if you see the blinds in the windows, she was giving me landlord 101. Like if you see the blinds may be cracked, it may be time to go in and change the air filter and make sure everybody's okay and acting right. And it was, there was some hand holding there. And I tell you what, the tenants that we have gotten from Shay, and I miss the hell out of you in that old position, I'll just say that again, have been fantastic. They're in most cases, they're our best renters, for sure.
I think that it comes a lot too with even like where you were saying like the hand holding. I think we just truly want to be a change agent, right? So whether it's offering landlord workshops, created those. I sat on 1 million panels and seminars with landlords in the city, whether it is CMHA related or not, on what to look for. These are the different things that you do. Here's some things that you should do throughout 1 year of your initial leasing contract. How often do you go into a unit? How, a lot of people are they complain about damages or anything, but if people have been in your unit for 5 years and you've seen that unit once, that is on you as a landlord, right? And so some of that is tough love that I give to, tough love and tough conversation that I say, hey, well, what did you do? XYZ. Anything I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you to do, whether it's a market tenant that is not receiving subsidy or somebody underneath CMHA's umbrella. And that's because it's your business. So you want to make sure that that your asset is fine. I know that in my current position, I'm making sure that my assets are fine every day. And I have 14 large properties and a park and a daycare.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you started that was it landlord relations position, the fact that you spent that much time getting to know the other side of things is, I mean, kudos to you. That is the perfect way to start. And that's, and I think that's why you were so successful in what you did. That was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and Shay, I think we have to commend you on here. Like, not everyone's willing to go above and beyond to truly make it work to become that change agent, and that's probably one of the reasons why some affordable housing programs are not as successful, because there's not enough handholding. And I think one key thing that you're probably doing, and we might not have said it yet, is like you're removing the fear out of the landlord's position, and that allows people to get more involved in affordable housing. Like, we talked about the stigmas earlier, and one of the reasons we have you on the podcast is like, one, to how do we demystify the process so people actually understand, hey, what does it mean to invest in affordable housing, and what happens when there are problems? Because if you tell people like, hey, this might happen, but this is how you resolve it, now they can say, well, I'm no longer scared of that problem, because boom, Shay gave me this tip to look for this in the blinds, and if that happens, then I know what to do. Shay, maybe are you able to provide some advice? It seems like you're just a gold mine. You're full of gems here. Any other things you can advice that you might be able to give to new landlords for things to look out for? Maybe you can expand a little bit on that blind thing that you were telling Dane about. I think that would be really cool to understand.
I was just telling Dane that, hey, if you start to see, more than one cracked blind, at that point, especially if they're the newer blinds that everyone is beginning to use are those faux woods, right? It takes a minute to break those. That you have to be doing some serious moving around there, unless you have pets or something like that are constantly in the blinds. Also, I know landlords don't like to be responsible sometimes for light bulbs. Put that on your list of duties, because that gets you in your unit. Okay, so exterior, offer it. Hey, as an incentive of you renting with me, I'm willing to do boom, 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 right? Make those things that are beneficial to yourself as an owner. So
great tip. Wow.
Yeah.
Great tip there.
If you do a quarterly or a half year filter change, right? That gives you access to your unit. At the end of the day, you own the property. Don't feel like you cannot see your property. Obviously, don't do it in excess. I'm not saying go in once a month or whatever the case may be. If it's quarterly, if it's in a half a year, I can tell you what I do currently, which is as an asset manager, which essentially is the owner, right? So I'm the owner for all of our properties. I do a quarterly inspection at my properties because we own it. I don't just leave it to my management company to run, right? There's checks and balances. I'm inside of units on those. I pick, if you have a larger portfolio of units, then, pick a handful, 3 every quarter, and do a random, I'm going to randomly go and check out the property. Make sure you're looking at your landscaping, seeing if people are, damaging the grass, all that kind of stuff kind of gives you a telltale sign. But when you don't lay eyes on your properties, a lot of times our clients also don't leave for long periods of time, right? So you can have somebody there for 5 years, 6 years. And if you never go in, there's, what does that say about you as a landlord as well, right? Like, do you care about your property? I would care about my property. I want to see it, a lot of investors or developers or landlords, owners, whichever terminology they want to be used, A lot of them in Columbus right now are based out of town.
You just hit, yes.
So
Preach on that for a second, because I was gonna talk to you about that.
I love the movement, right? Kudos to everyone expanding business. I get it. But you have to have eyes and ears in whatever city that you are owning property in. I own property in Florida. I have a property manager that's going to oversee, that I'm going to check in with. You can't self-run and then only do contract out like things that you need, like plumbing or all of those different things. If you have one property, okay, I can understand that, right? The overhead of paying for a manager might be a little too much for the budget for your year, right? It just doesn't make sense. But if you have 4 or 5 or more properties, invest in having someone, even a part-time person or on call, whatever the case is, and set up the parameters within that contract, that they go and walk units, take pictures of the property and send it to you, those kind of things, right? Because you don't like surprises as an owner, and that will help prevent that.
Yeah, and that's Kent. I beat this over Kent's head. Is everybody still sees Columbus, especially 5 years ago, like we were talking about, as a very affordable place to invest in real estate. And it was 5 years ago, now it's getting a little more competitive. But what Jared and I were seeing, we were getting outbid by a lot of people from New York, California, Seattle, Florida on occasion, because they see how affordable it is, and then once they get involved, then they realize, oh, okay, this is not as affordable, and whatever it may be, that it's not as affordable as we thought. We don't know what the hell we're doing. We're busy with other ventures. Oh, it's affordable housing. Who the hell cares? Who knows what they're thinking?
Or they're looking to flip.
But most of the time, we would then see those properties 3 years later, and the grass is up to my hips. Jared and I are talking about buying it from these people, and the value had dropped down. So I think that's a big part of it too. And I wish there was a way to promote more local ownership too. Not just because I am local, but just because there tends to be more people than on site. I always say I invest where I live, so I can drive at the very most 30 minutes one way and see the building, talk to the tenants, talk to the landlords. I'm on my properties at least once a month, usually twice a month, even if it's just a quick drive through to make sure there's no trash in the yards, and that there's no excessive wear and tear. I've got one question for you. And there may not be an answer to this, but it's something that it's just the way my mind works. And I got a 12-year-old daughter who's looking at me through the glass doors here. And I tell her all the time, sometimes you have to make things happen. If it's something that you really want, you have to listen to the universe or the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to talk about. But sometimes if it's something, you got to make it happen. And we've got people that listen to this podcast that have high net worths and enjoy what Kent and I are talking about, and our investors. Is there a way with somebody that, if somebody had a big checkbook, is there a way that they could get involved and help on a major scale? In terms of, you had mentioned, CMHA needs units. Is there a way that they could get involved in that? And if so, what would that look like? Because if you give me, I've been thinking about this for 5 years, and I've been like, man, I don't know what it is. I don't know what that answer would be. But if you have the answer, I'll make it happen. I'm gonna start making phone calls and dialing it up and see if we can get some progress.
So what I would suggest is purchasing within the city, not necessarily a partnership, because I want a partnership with CMHA in ownership of any sort, but in the form of these are we talked a lot about like all the old hotels, all all the stuff spread out throughout the city. I remember you were thinking about doing something then at that point, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many things available that people don't want to touch. Those are the things that you make happen, right? Even us in our acquisition strategy, there were several buildings that are historic in nature, right? And we had to go in and create something brand new. The Harris, which is one of the if not the first Black early child care schools, was completely ran down, and we went in and created 10 amazing, unique units that are like literally amazing. Like they're so cool, and it gives the opportunity for people in workforce housing to have another option.
Yeah.
Right. So those kind of things, and that way you can, as an owner, you can also get your ROI. You know what I mean? You don't have to be beholden to any other major company, right? If we do a purchase of any sort, a lot of times project-based vouchers are going to be attached to it or something like that. You want to be able to kind of move however you want to move as an owner. Maybe you want to offer up 15 to 20% of that property to residents that receive a voucher, right? And in reality, with the new ordinance, it's technically your whole property, if they qualify, because they don't you don't get to tell them no based strictly on that. So if they qualify for something, then they qualify for it.
Yeah. And that hotel deal you're referencing, like literally I got that to the finishing line.
What was it? Zoning? Was it a zoning issue?
I got zoning on board finally, yeah. But man, that was a lot of that was just me going through it the first time. But I got it to the finishing line where zoning was on board. I signed the agreement, faxed it over, or I'm sorry, emailed it over, and then the seller refused to sign, because that would have been, I think if I remember correctly, 99 units.
Mm-hmm.
They even jumped on board, like writing a letter to the lender, I believe, saying, look, we'll take them all. Like
you won't have any problems filling them if that's,
yeah.
Give them this money, please.
I worked so hard on that. I worked so hard. When that fell apart, I went into a depression. I literally didn't work for a week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was just busted. I'm like, oh.
So in housing, you'll learn disappointment with grace. There's no telling it. Like, you're going to have some really high highs and some really low lows.
Yeah. Now, the CMHA partner with landlords and people like myself, or is that not an option?
I won't say that it's not an option. We do. It is very few and in between based on what we, track record, what we've seen, because obviously we are attached to a city brand. And so it's a little bit different when we're quasi government. Yeah. And we need our hands clean as much as possible.
Sure.
So it really just depends on the other stakeholder.
Okay.
And what's being brought to the table. If it's something new and unique, or there's something that we just can't say no to, then it's just like, hey, we're going to have a conversation.
But let's have some conversations. Look how adorable I am.
Dang, you know how to reach me.
Yeah. I need to find the buildings, the properties, everything's so hyper inflated price wise right now. Trust me, I was on a call yesterday with a guy worth $100 million, and he's like, I'm waiting, just be patient. I'm like, all right, I'll be patient.
Yeah, like it's being felt everywhere. We're not exempt. There are certain moves that we couldn't make this year so far that was on the pipeline for us that we had to just pull back from, because it was just, it just didn't align, and it just, sometimes it's not always going to work out. and we've kind of gone a lot more to some new builds too in the meantime while we figure some things out, so that we can keep the ball rolling. The goal is to constantly have affordable housing rolling through every year. We try to add at least 500 units a year.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you're pivoting, and like I'm pivoting. There's no multifamily that's affordable right now, so I'm pivoting into single family and being involved that way. And so I get it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we serve 165,000 residents right now.
Yeah.
So there are people on the program. There are landlords housing these people, right? But there are so many more that need assistance that we just cannot, we can't reach, fast enough.
Yeah. So if you're an investor listening, Kent, we got to get them involved here, hitting us up and investing in Columbus. So let's make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, Shay, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I thanked you before this call. I want to thank you again for coming on here and sharing so much value, for removing the fear from some of the people that are looking to invest in affordable housing. Seriously, without people like you, I think every guest here is like, without people like you, seriously, I would not have had an upbringing that I had, become the man that I am today, had an amazing family. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for helping hundreds of thousands of people. Like, that is an amazing, staggering number for you to be a part of. And I hope we can one day have you come back on and just hear what you're doing on your front with CMHA and seeing how it's growing and expanding. But thank you so much, Shay. And people want to reach out to you, Shay. Like, can they find you on LinkedIn? How can they get in touch with you?
My name is Shay Mock on LinkedIn. I believe I am the only Shay Mock there.
Oh, I love it.
That's a thing. Feel free to reach out to me there. If there's housing specific questions or you need some advice on something, I'm not shy when it comes to my email. They can feel free to email me as well.
Love it.
And that is smock@cmhanet.com. So smock@cmhanet.com. Feel free. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find an answer for you or send you to someone who has the answer.
Wow. Thank you so much, Shay, for being so open and sharing your email even. That is amazing. So that's how we know you absolutely love what you do. So thank you so much for coming on to the show, Shay. I hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shay.